Brian here with another update on my gardening projects. It is April 2013. It's been about a month since my last update, so I wanted to give a bit of documentation on the progress so far. Before I do that outdoors though, I wanted to give an update on my indoor aquaponics system, which I've talked about in the past. And this is a bit of bad news, unfortunately. I'm debating whether to continue running this system. So I've had this, as you can see from my previous videos, for several years, and it's been reasonably successful for basic things like parsley and mint and like tomato starts and things. The problem though is that my real intent most recently was to start my tomatoes, peppers, things like that in here and then transplant them outside. Well, unfortunately this year that didn't work so well. Last year I was able to transplant a couple tomatoes successfully, but this year I don't know if it's because I transplanted them while they were too small. I did start my tomatoes a little late this year, but so far I've made like 5 attempts at transplants and all of them have died after being moved outdoors. So I'm not really sure what I'm doing wrong, except that again maybe I should have waited for the tomato to get bigger. The other problem though is that my fish keep dying in this system, and a couple months ago I had them all die, and so I did a 2/3 or so water change, let the water stand, got the system running for a while before I added the fish back in, and then I added a few more fish and they just all died in the past week. So I'm not sure what's going on with the chemical balance. I've done some water tests, and as far as what that measures, nothing seems off. But anyway, it's just not been a very productive system lately. It grows parsley great, but it's not really worth running the whole thing just for parsley. And again, you can see there's a nice big tomato there, but I don't need any more tomatoes this year. I've already planted everything I need, many of which from seed because none of the ones from here worked. So I'm kind of debating what to do about this system, and I may just decide to decommission it, at least for a while. So anyway, that's a little disappointing, but we'll move outside and we're having more success out there. So spring is in full swing here in Austin, although we've had a bit of a weird year so far with some really drastic changes in temperature. Like I said, it's mid-April, and just last night it got down into the low 40s, and in parts of Texas it was down into the 30s in the last couple nights. So that's a bit strange. And it has, I think, slowed a lot of my tomatoes and things from really getting established nice and quickly here in the spring. So a lot of things are a little bit behind where they were or where I would expect them to be this time of year. But still, things are looking alright. In a previous video I posted about a hailstorm we had, and you can see there's still some evidence of that storm on these leaves. This is my persimmon plant. But nevertheless, you know, the tree is looking pretty healthy, leafing out a lot, which is good. I did do something controversial with this tree a year ago, and you can see there evidence at the top there is I topped it. Now normally that's not something you're supposed to do. It's kind of bad for the tree, prevents them from reaching their full potential, etc. But this persimmon tree is something that I wanted to keep kind of small and compact. I wanted to be able to reach the fruit, and so I decided to do that, and also to encourage more broadening of the habit rather than further growth vertically. So we'll see. This is definitely an experiment. I'm not sure if that was the right call. A lot of people would say it wasn't, but again, I'm trying to kind of train this thing to be a little bit smaller, and it really looks kind of gnarly right now, so I'm hoping by preventing it from growing up higher, it'll do a little bit more growth sort of in the middle. And it was flowering nicely. You can see some fruit there. And really exciting this year, the grapes are finally fruiting. Last year we had a lot of leafy growth but no grapes, and this year it's looking like we're going to get a bunch of grapes. Hopefully the birds will not beat us to them. but that's really exciting to finally see some production out of this grape plant. Here's my keyhole garden, which in some other videos you can see more details on, but I've got some onions and shallots there in the front. Under the tent, I'll show you in a sec, there are some squash, zucchini, and green beans. I've got a pepper here, which honestly is not looking that great. Got kind of set back by the hail. And I think all the cold weather has kept it from really growing, so that's unfortunate. And also in here we've got some carrots and some peas, which I'm not exactly sure how these are doing. They're growing kind of slowly, and you can see some brown leaves down there at the bottom on the two bigger ones, so not sure what's going on with that. So I built this tent out of row cover, and the intention here is to keep the moths and stuff out of the plants, out of the squash plants. Last year my squash all died because of squash vine borer, and this is to keep those moths out while the plants get mature, and then the intent is to take this off once the flowers start blooming to let the pollinators in. Dewberries in full bloom, looking really pretty. This guy is spreading quite aggressively as well, so something to keep in mind with dewberries is anytime one of the stalks, or canes I guess, hits the ground, it'll put down roots. And so it's great if you want it to fill an area, but back here I want to kind of keep it contained, so I've had to be a little bit careful about that. The blackberry is flowering as well, looking pretty. It's not looking quite as healthy or aggressive as the dewberry, but I think we should get some fruit this year. And the chives, which I planted I think 2 years ago now, have come in quite nicely and are flowering beautifully. The purple flowers are both just regular chive, and the plant on the left is a garlic chive. I don't know if it will flower at some point or what, but it looks fairly different. And then moving on up, you can see the peach is in bloom finally. It's quite a bit behind where it was last year in terms of the bloom schedule, but it did finally flower. I did spray some copper spray earlier before the blooms burst, and I've also picked off some of the buds from each branch to try to keep it from fruiting out too much. We want to prevent it from putting too much energy into lots of fruit, so that it can focus that energy on a few. None of our peaches matured last year, they all dropped, so we're hoping this year to actually get something edible. The idea with asparagus is to let it establish the first couple of years and really get a good root system out, and as you can see it keeps putting out some new stems, so we could harvest some this year if we really wanted to, but I think I'm just going to let this stuff grow in more, and then next year we'll start harvesting. We've got the peppermint and spearmint, unsurprisingly, is doing really well. It's filled in really well. The strawberries are actually looking good, and we've got some reddening there a little bit on one of those strawberries. So that's kind of fun. The dill and the cilantro is looking really nice. That there is just a daylily I planted. We got it from my parents for Easter, so I figured I'd stick it in the ground. And then over here are the tomatoes I was talking about. So I'm a little disappointed. We really love the Brandywine variety of tomato, and last year we had 3 plants that were quite productive, and I wanted to plant even more of those this year, but unfortunately none of the transplants survived. So my only Brandywine right now is this little guy. So he's way behind, obviously, and it's just disappointing that we're not going to get much Brandywine. That big one in the middle there is from a nursery. I bought it as a plant. That's an Earl of Edgecombe tomato. The one in the back there is a Black Prince. And then these two over here are Chadwick cherries, which I started from seed. And these are transplants. I think they're both from this outdoor aquaponics system. And they actually seeded themselves from, I guess, tomatoes that had gotten pecked at by birds or something, put down some seeds. Similarly, that tomato you see there on the left, planted or growing outside of my garden, and the one right there in that corner there of the frame, those are both, I think, Chadwick cherries that started on their own. It's actually possible that this is a Brandywine. This might be a Brandywine, and if so, that would be really good. So we might get two. Moving to the aquaponics system. So we've got 2 Chadwick cherries in there that planted themselves from last year. There's a little pepper there in the back that hasn't really done anything, and I don't know why. And the same with this. This is a Brandywine tomato that's not looking very good. It looks like it did not transplant well. So this one I did actually move from the aquaponics system inside and moved him out here, and it's not looking too good. I do see a sprout here. I believe that's a pepper that I planted out here. So anyway, this is looking a little behind as well, but hopefully this will finally catch up. There should be a good amount of nitrogen. The fish have been looking great. Showed them in a previous video, and I haven't lost one in months actually. And so the fish are looking really healthy in there. And a quick update on my front garden, since I showed some of that before. This is the status of the succulents that I planted. That ice plant on the left there was there last year and got some freeze damage, but it seems to have survived barely. That middle succulent, which is just a kind of generic succulent, I don't even know what type it is, obviously is looking really nice. Aloe's looking okay, and the others seem to be struggling a bit. It may be that this dirt holds too much moisture. Moving over here, we've got a lantana. He's been blooming, and a couple more lantana. Seem to be okay. I'm hoping these will fill in over the years. This lantana got knocked down to the ground from the hail, and it's gradually coming back. And there's just a random strawberry in the back there that's still living. Moving over to these herbs over here, oregano is looking really good. Chamomile also is looking really good. The purple sage that I planted from the nursery actually died, so those are all some sage from seed that I planted. Last time I had a hard time getting sage to germinate, so I planted a ton of seed, and clearly a lot of them germinated. So I may have to pull some of those out. Lavender's looking alright. Rosemary's looking good. And the thyme is looking pretty good. So it might be a little bit leggy because it's up back here and shaded, but at least it seems to be healthy. Also wanted to point out the native grass that I planted a year ago. It took all of last year to really establish, and now it's looking really nice. And if you look, it's actually greener than my Bermuda, which is a testament to its lower water requirements. I don't water back here at all, and while we've had some rain, we haven't had a lot. So the Bermuda is kind of struggling, while the native buffalo and blue grama is looking quite healthy. I've also let it go to seed every time before I mow it, and that's probably helping it establish and spread as well.